Hey guys, Mike here from Rust Brothers. As you probably know by now, my buddy Todd from EG Auctions.
Mike Hall didn't set out to become a TV star. He was simply trying to get rid of hundreds of cars no one wanted. Before Rust Valley Restorers, Mike Hall owned hundreds of rusting vehicles in rural British Columbia that nobody wanted to buy. Then one decision flipped everything and pulled him into the spotlight. So what really happened after that moment? And how did it turn into Rust Valley Restorers? Join us as we uncover what really happened to Mike Hall from Rust Valley Restorers and where he is today. The man who hung off mountains before he restored old cars. Michael Hall was not a car restorer, a television personality, or any of the things his audience eventually came to know him for. He was a rock blaster. He owned his own company, Chimera Springs Rock Works, in the slope stabilization industry. Known in his world as the Rasta Blasta, a nickname earned for his famous dreadlocks, Mike and his crew scaled unstable roadside cliffs and set off controlled explosives to manage the unpredictable erosion. This was dangerous, physically demanding, highly skilled work that required a specific combination of courage, precision, and deep technical understanding of how rock behaves under pressure. The show vaguely references his pre-television career in construction, a kind of word that flattens a genuinely interesting reality into something unremarkable. The man who spends his television time lovingly restoring old Chevrolets and arguing with his son about the shop's finances spent his working years dangling off the sides of mountains in British Columbia, placing explosive charges to prevent rock slides from killing people on public highways. That is not a mild day job. It is the kind of work that attracts a specific personality type, someone who is comfortable with risk, deeply familiar with practical problem solving, and genuinely unbothered by doing things that make most people uncomfortable. Those qualities translated directly into the television personality that his audience fell in love with. The fearlessness and the calm were not cultivated for the cameras. They were already there. The money from Chimera Springs Rock Works went almost entirely into one thing: classic vehicles that most of the world had decided were finished. By the time his property near Tappan, British Columbia, had fully developed into what the surrounding community began calling Rust Valley, Mike had accumulated over 400 cars across multiple decades and eras of American automotive history. The area code and the landscape both contributed to the name. The rural South Shuswap region near the Trans-Canada Highway, the morning mist over the hills, and, above all, the field full of rusting vehicles that looked like a graveyard to some and a treasure trove to others. Mike was under no confusion about which one it was. To him, every car on that property had a story and a future, even if nobody else could see the future part yet. By the time the show started, his net worth had reached approximately $5 million, the majority of it built through the rock blasting business, with a significant portion tied to the value of the cars and the property. That number is important because it pushes back against the bumbling, financially impractical character that the show occasionally leaned into for dramatic effect. A rock blaster who accumulated 400 cars and a $5 million net worth before any camera showed up. So how does that man end up on international television? The answer is one of the most accidentally brilliant marketing decisions in the history of automotive culture: the viral listing that nobody could have planned. In 2016, Mike Hall tried the conventional approach. He listed both his property and the cars on a real estate website with an asking price of $1 million Canadian dollars. The logic was straightforward. The property was substantial, the collection was extraordinary, and $1 million seemed like a reasonable number for what was on offer. The market disagreed. Nobody called or made an offer. Nobody even came to look. The listing sat there in digital silence, while the 400 cars sat in physical silence in the field near Tappan. Most people in that situation would have lowered the price. Mike Hall raised it. His reasoning was the specific, backward, completely intuitive logic of someone who had spent decades understanding that the value of something is not always recognized at its first asking price, and that sometimes the way to get attention is not to make yourself more accessible, but to make yourself more interesting. He raised the price and changed the story from man selling property to man who refuses to accept the market's verdict on what his cars are worth. That is a fundamentally different and considerably more interesting narrative, and the internet responded to it immediately. The story spread, the media covered it, people shared it, and somewhere in that coverage, producers from Mayhem Entertainment saw not just a viral real estate story, but a genuinely compelling human being at its center. He was funny, knowledgeable, completely uninterested in performing for anyone's expectations, and sitting in the middle of a visual landscape that was extraordinary. 400-plus classic cars from multiple decades, in various states of decay and preservation, spread across a field in rural British Columbia with mountains in the background and mist on the hills. The History Channel originally wanted to document his rock-scaling work. They saw the Rasta Blasta hanging off cliffs and setting controlled explosions and thought that was the show. Then someone looked at the liability insurance question, and the production team looked at the cars and made the obvious call. The cliff work was too dangerous to film practically. The cars were extraordinary. The show became Rust Valley Restorers instead of whatever it would have been called if they had gone with the original concept. His appearance on Discovery Canada's Highway Through Hell before the Rust Valley show launched was also part of the equation. The show follows two teams working on British Columbia's dangerous highways during bad weather, and Mike made a guest appearance that confirmed what the producers suspected. He was a natural television presence who did not need coaching, direction, or management to be compelling on camera. He was simply himself, and he was more entertaining than most people the industry actively cultivated. The viral listing got him noticed. The Highway Through Hell appearance got him the deal. The show that followed ran 5 seasons and reached a global Netflix audience in the tens of millions. He went viral by raising the price on something nobody wanted to buy, survived a near miss with a show about cliffhangers, and landed on Netflix. Now, let's talk about what the show was actually about and what the cameras were really showing, because the dramatic tension that made Rust Valley Restorers so watchable was built on something more complicated than a simple father and son argument about money. The financial tension that was more real than it looked. Rust Valley Restorers premiered on the History Canadian channel in December 2018. On August 23, 2019, the series was released internationally on Netflix. The format was built around the daily operations of Rust Bros Restorations, the workshop Mike built on his Tappan property to actually execute the restoration work that the car collection had always promised but never fully delivered. For decades, Mike had been accumulating vehicles. The shop was the mechanism by which those vehicles became something other than a very large, very expensive field of rust. It was the thing that turned a collection into a business, and the tension between those two things, the collector's instinct and the businessman's obligation, became the emotional engine of the show. The cast that made the early seasons work so well was not just Mike Hall. Avery Schoaf, whose nickname Muscle Car MacGyver reflected a remarkable ability to improvise solutions to mechanical problems that conventional approaches could not solve, was the other essential personality. Schoaf had previously run a company repairing heavy equipment and brought a technical depth to the shop that complemented Mike's vision and enthusiasm. His ability to look at a seized, corroded, decades-dormant engine and find a path to getting it running again without always having access to the right parts was the kind of practical mechanical genius that most restoration shows document but rarely capture as honestly as Rust Valley Restorers did in those first 2 seasons. When Shoaff eventually left to start his own restoration business called Wildman Restorations, the show lost something specific that took time to find again in the later casts. Connor Hall, Mike's son, was the other constant. The dynamic between Mike and Connor that the show built its dramatic structure around was not invented for the cameras, though it was certainly amplified by them. Mike genuinely does tend to fall in love with the cars he is restoring. He genuinely does make decisions that prioritize the vehicle and the person it is going to, rather than the shop's profit margin. He has sold restorations for less than they cost to complete because the right buyer appeared, and the financial logic was lost to the emotional one. Connor genuinely does worry about the bottom line. The arguments were real arguments about real money, and the audience responded to that authenticity in a way that more polished, scripted automotive television rarely achieves. What the show's editing sometimes obscured was the more complicated reality underneath that dynamic. Mike Hall built a $5 million net worth in a demanding and genuinely dangerous industry before any of this television business existed. The man arguing with his son about whether they could afford to keep a particular car had already demonstrated, over the decades, that he understood how to build something financially sustainable. The financially impractical version of him that the show spotlighted was one aspect of a much more complete person, selected for its entertainment value, which is entirely legitimate as a television decision and also worth understanding as a viewer. The show ran 5 seasons and reached a global audience of millions. The financial tension between Mike and Connor made for great television. But what was happening behind the scenes of the business itself? And how did the real operational challenges of running a restoration shop in rural British Columbia eventually create the crisis that the most recent content refers to as the fight to save everything? The fight to save the shop and what that battle actually involves. In a 2019 interview with Driving Canada, Mike was open about the early financial reality of Rust Bros Restorations. His accountant had told him he had lost significant money the previous year, having broken even on only 2 cars. The show was generating income from the television deal and from the profile it created, but the restoration business itself, as a standalone operation, was genuinely struggling to achieve the consistent profit margins needed to be sustainable independent of the media income. The financial tensions that Connor kept raising on camera were not fabricated drama. They were a real ongoing conversation about whether the business model was working. The YouTube series, launched in May 2025 and titled After the Auction, describes Mike Hall as being in a fight to save the car restoration shop he built with his own hands. That framing is the most honest public description of where things stand, and it exists in a specific context that makes it easier to understand. The Hagerty 2025 Classic Car Index shows that values for 1960s and 1970s vehicles have risen approximately 25% year over year in recent periods. The cars that Mike has been accumulating for decades are now worth considerably more than they were when he started collecting them. But rising asset values do not automatically translate into operational cash flow. The costs of running the shop, staffing it, sourcing parts for vehicles that have not been manufactured for 50 years, and maintaining both the property and the collection remain real and ongoing pressures regardless of what the underlying assets are theoretically worth on the market. When the business model works at full capacity, it works extremely well. A standout project from Season 5 involved Mike restoring a 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air, investing $15,000 in parts and time, and selling the finished vehicle for $120,000, an $80,000 profit on a single car. That is not a marginal return. That is the kind of number that makes a restoration business genuinely attractive as a commercial proposition. The challenge is consistency. Getting from one finished car that sells at that margin to a sustainable operation where that outcome is reliably reproducible month after month is the specific business problem that the fight to save the shop is really about. The auction referenced in the After the Auction series title is connected to this tension between asset value and cash flow. When a business owns significant assets but is experiencing operational pressure, selling some of those assets through auction is a logical mechanism for resolving the pressure. For Mike Hall, whose entire identity is bound up in the collection he has spent 50 years building, the idea of auctioning cars is not simply a financial transaction. It is a deeply personal decision about which parts of what he has built he is willing to let go, and in what order. The fight to save the shop is a financial fight and an emotional fight simultaneously, and that combination is precisely what makes it compelling content as well as a genuine life challenge. The business has been fighting for financial consistency since the beginning, and the latest chapter of that fight is playing out in public through the After the Auction series. But the story of where Mike stands right now is considerably more forward-looking than the fight to save language suggests. So what is he actually building in 2025 and 2026? And where is the Rasta Blasta heading? Where the Rasta Blasta is now. Mike Hall is 67 years old in 2026. He is still in Tappan, British Columbia. He is still on the property where 400 cars once waited for someone to decide they were worth saving. He is still restoring cars, still arguing with Connor about money in ways that both of them would probably describe as affectionate as much as frustrating, and still making decisions that prioritize the vehicle and the person it goes to over the margin on the restoration. He received a clean bill of health from a 2024 medical checkup. He is, by every available measure, still fully operational. What has changed is the direction his thinking is moving. In 2025, he donated a restored 1968 Camaro to a youth automotive program, a contribution that the program credited with inspiring 50 teenagers and reducing local dropout rates by 12%. That donation is consistent with the version of Mike Hall, who will sell a restored car for less than cost if the right buyer appears. And it is also a signal of how he thinks about the shop's role in the community it operates within. Rust Bros Restorations is not simply a business that happens to be located in Tappan. It is an institution that is connected to the region. And Mike clearly thinks of his responsibility to that community as real and ongoing. He has trained over 20 apprentices through the shop and has exported restored vehicles across North America. The knowledge base that Mike has built across 50 years of collecting and restoring classic cars is not sitting in his head unused between filming sessions. It is being transferred to a next generation of restorers who are learning what he learned the hard way and who will carry that knowledge forward into an industry that needs it. His interest in electric conversions for classic cars is perhaps the most forward-looking signal of all. He has said publicly that the world is changing, and so is Rust Valley. The man who built his identity on the combustion era of American automotive history is thinking seriously about how those vehicles survive in a world that is moving toward different propulsion systems. Connor married Jada Mazikeen Kovach Hall in September 2022 and continues to work at Rust Bros alongside his father. The generational tension that the show built its dramatic structure around is also a generational continuity. The argument about money is the same argument that business partners who care about the same thing have been having for as long as businesses have existed. Connor cares about the shop surviving as a business. Mike cares about the cars surviving as cars. Both of them care about Rust Valley. The argument is evidence of caring. His salary from Rust Valley Restorers is estimated at approximately $100,000 per season, with the shop generating over $500,000 annually from car flips and restorations when operating at its current capacity. The $5 million net worth he built before the cameras arrived has grown rather than diminished across the years the show has been running. The fight to save the shop is a real fight with real stakes, but it is being waged by someone who has been building things in difficult conditions for his entire adult life, and who has not yet, in 67 years of doing exactly that, run out of the energy or the ingenuity to keep going. So what do you think? Was Mike Hall building a dream or a business that was always going to be difficult to sustain? And which Rust Valley build stood out to you the most? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.